Okay, it's time for the masterclass here on Joy 99.7. My name is Northern Akwa Hayford. Thank you very much for tuning in. And last week we began something on procurement. Time check is 17 minutes after 1 o'clock here on Joy 99.7. And in Ghana here, many people seem to want to become entrepreneurs. And these days, you realize that people have got all sorts of ideas. And most often than not, we want to be able to, supply things to government agencies. And these things that we have to supply, you ask yourself, how do you go about it? How do you ensure that you are part of the system? Now, statistics around the world shows that government is always the biggest spender. Or you say they are the ones that buy a lot. It is in the light of this that we spend 15 minutes, or for the month of August, in every Wednesday, we'll be spending 45 minutes, I beg your pardon, in sharing practical steps, how to go about it, how to become part of the system, and how to ensure that you can win that bid and be part of the procurement system. Now, what we expect at the end of the month, it is one of the requirements that, when we are done, you understand how to register with the Public Procurement Authority. And then you'd also understand the process of putting together a winnable tender document. And then we are also going to ensure that, when it comes to you being dissatisfied with the process, what are the avenues for you to get redress? And then finally, how to execute a contract or execute an effective contract that has been awarded to you. Let me just remind you that last week what we did with my guest here in the studio was to look at Start It Right. We learned that, the Public Procurement Authority has begun registration of all those who are supposed to get supplies and all the things that you need. So you need to just go to their website. When you get in there, all the questions and documents have been provided, which would allow you to, register and you become part of the government pool. And all government agencies, that is MMDAs, are expected to, collect their suppliers from this pool that is being put together by the Public Procurement Authority. And then, whilst they do that, you go in there, you do that, it allows you are registered, because if you're not registered, sorry, you can't be part of it. This is just by way of recall some of the things that we learned last week. My guest is with me in the studio. We're going to go straight to today's topic, which is also an interesting one that you need to know. It is Get Set for the Competition. Are you ready for that competition? If you are, why not? My guest is with me in the studio, and that is the CEO for the Public Procurement Authority, that is ABAJ. He's right here with me. He's going to give us his presentation. After that, I will open the phone lines and allow you to be part of this conversation. But what you can do is, whilst he's going on with the presentation, you can, text us via WhatsApp, and the number is 0244 340 437. Let me take the numbers again, slowly this time. 0244 340437. You can engage me by sending your text messages to that. And let me also help you take this phone number down, because I'll definitely activate the phone lines and allow you to be part of this conversation. It is 0302 3216 541. That is 0302 216 541. You can be part of the conversation. Let me just go straight and welcome my guest to the studio. Good afternoon to you, Mr. J.
Good afternoon, Norvan.
I hope you're doing well.
Extremely well, indeed.
I'm sure that we are all getting ready for the competition, and today we're hoping to hear you, take us through how to get set for the competition.
Sure.
And so if you're ready, all the students are ready. It's time for the masterclass. Mr. J, over to you.
All right. Thank you very much. And a very good afternoon to your cherished listeners. Maybe we'll have to do a recap of last week's class.
Yeah, which I was just doing
really?
Just a while ago. I was trying to take them through some of the things that we learned, starting it right.
Wonderful.
Some of the things that they needed to do.
Wonderful. I think last week we tried to explain the distinction between procurement and purchasing. And then we were able to establish that purchasing is indeed a subset of the procurement, set of tasks, within the supply chain framework. So I think a lot of the listeners were able to grasp that particular distinction. So without wasting time, I think we can go straight to today's subject matter, which has to do with how to establish a relationship with your suppliers, and whether or not it is necessary to engage in market intelligence and strategy within the procurement process. Now, last week we also spoke about some of the requirements that any business entrepreneur or any company which wish to assess or partake in the public sector procurement process needs to have. And I even went further to explain the various qualification criteria in the area of building and works, to show the categories that one has to belong to. All those are requirements, so that depending on the type of procurement that you seek to partake in it, the requirements could be peculiar. But then the general requirements for eligibility as a supplier, which we mentioned the other time, has to do with statutory requirements. And if I may just list them again, there is the need for you to have a valid SNET clearance certificate.
Yeah.
You need your VAT registration certificate, if it is applicable to you. Then you also need your valid business registration, your valid certificate of incorporation, and then your certificate or your registration from PPA, for that matter. The reason why you need the certificate from PPA is because PPA is put together a centralized supplier database where almost every state entity will go to pull out the list of suppliers and contractors and consultants that they want to keep internally as their own supplier database at the entity level. So it is very necessary that suppliers take advantage, because hitherto they will have to go to as many of these entities and register individually with these entities. But today, once you get registered with the PPA, your information is centrally captured and everybody can access to that. Now, let's come to actual procurement. And that is where the business itself is. You see, when you want to participate in a procurement process, once you feel you are qualified, especially with the requirements that I have listed, then the next thing is to fish out for where tender opportunities are.
Okay.
Because that is what you must do. Because in only on few occasions that entities are able to contact suppliers directly, and normally that happens in restrictive tendering. But basically, the responsibility to look out for a tender opportunity rests with the entrepreneur or rests with the business. Essentially, you will find most of these tender opportunities on PPA website. Because the law requires that all entities, state institutions that comes under the scope of application of the Procurement Act must post their tender notices on the PPA website.
Okay.
So that is a requirement. All right. So if you go to the PPA website, you should be able to find the tender opportunities out there.
Currently available with government agencies.
With government agencies. Again, the law also requires that they should publish their tender opportunities in a newspaper of wide circulation. So usually you see them in the Daily Graphic, Ghanaian Times, and Business and Financial Times. And then you can also look out for these opportunities at the websites of the entities themselves. So if you want to do business with NCA, NPA, GPHA, VRA, GRADECO, and all these state institutions, you may also want to go to their website and see if they have posted them there. But like I said, the law requires that they post these opportunities because the suppliers wants to have a central point where they can go and find this information rather than having to, hop around all these entities and look for the opportunities. Then last but not the least is the direct contact, as I said. Sometimes out of what the entities have captured in their database, they may decide to select a couple of them in tenders and invite them to come and purchase a tender document.
Mr. J, let me just ask you this. When it comes to what you've spoken about, you're saying that they can put it on the website, also on the PPA website. How about, publishing it in the newspapers?
I did mention that.
Yeah.
Yes, I did mention that. It is one of the requirements.
And then the notice board of the companies as well. That is if they don't have a website.
If they don't have a website, because if you go to the district assemblies, that is a very common practice. You come in the morning and you see on the notice board the tenders that are available for tenderers to participate. So those are but we encourage that as much of these notices and these opportunities be placed on the PPA website to give a central point for all the interested institutions that wants to be part of the public sector procurement process. All right. Now, having said that, if you are able to now know of an opportunity, once you get to know of an opportunity, it means there is something that is happening in those institutions. And normally, they will, on that notice, it is an open invitation that is thrown out there telling and requesting these suppliers to apply for a tender document.
Okay.
All right.
So that's what you call the expression of interest?
Well, it depends.
I want to understand.
Let's try and distinguish them. If it has to do with consultancy,
okay,
according to the law, all consultancy contracts must commence with expression of interest. So in that case, when you come to the PPA website, you see a request for expression of interest.
So those are terms that you use.
That's the terms that we use. So when you see a request for expression of interest or the invitation for expression of interest, all you have to do is that you have to get to the institution and get to know the requirements for the expression of interest, and then you participate in expressing your interest. It is after you have expressed your interest that they will do an evaluation and do a shortlist for those who qualify according to the criteria set for the expression of interest. It is only the ones that have been shortlisted that will be invited to submit requests for proposals, and that is for consultancy.
Okay.
But with regards to goods and works, essentially, when you see the invitation is inviting you to, approach the entity for a copy of their tender document.
Okay.
Now, if you purchase a tender document, in the tender document there will be a date for submission. So you buy the tender document to go and prepare or put together a tender, okay? Or sometimes people call it a bid.
Okay.
And then there is a bid submission deadline. So you buy it today and they will indicate the bid submission deadline. Under normal circumstances, according to the guidelines, if that tender is a national competitive tender, you are given 4 weeks from the date of the tender notice to the date of submission to be able to prepare your tender and submit it. I know there are occasions where the institutions, when they are engaged in restrictive tendering, depending on the exigency and the agency, they are able to negotiate among the suppliers, the shortlisted suppliers, to find out whether they will be able to put up a tender within 2 weeks. That is purely a matter of, negotiation, a matter of dialogue. It is not the norm, because the norm is that once somebody buys a tender document and it is a competitive tender, the minimum for national competitive for which they should go and put a tender together is 4 weeks.
4 weeks?
Yes.
I see.
And then for international competitive tender is 6 weeks. All right? But then, like I said, there are occasions that they are able to negotiate when they know they need the stuff so urgently. They can talk to all the shortlisted suppliers and ask them. So it's not an imposition. It is to get their buy-in, whether they will be able to put a tender together within 2 weeks. If you're able to do that internally and there are records to show that that was a dialogue, so that you don't disadvantage somebody who has that understanding that if I pick a tender, I am given 4 weeks to submit my tender. If that dialogue doesn't take place and somebody is not properly informed that you want them to bring it within 2 or 3 weeks, as you all have arranged between the buyer and the sellers, then of course you cannot hold it against the other person.
Let me ask, what should be the ideal situation? Should we have all of them in one room agree on the time by cutting it from the 4 weeks to probably 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or they should be spoken to individually? And when they do so and there is one among them that says no, what should the agency do?
You see, in procurement, we make sure that every form of correspondence is done in writing.
Okay.
You do not do any private conversation outside the written requirements. There is a requirement for every kind of interaction to be done in writing. So if that is the intention of the buying agency or the employer, which is in this case the entity wishing to engage tenderers, you have to put it in writing and get their written response. So as you said, if somebody among the list is unable to respond, then of course you may have to either use another means to tell them that under the circumstances you may have to unfortunately request for another supplier's consent for that matter. So, but those things are purely internal arrangements. They are outside the guidelines that the law has provided. Having said that, once these tenders have been procured, and my emphasis today in today's lecture has to do with having to put in a winning tender. I think that is the biggest issue for discussion today. Many times people buy these tender documents, and these tender documents are made up of various sections. Okay, it's got instruction to tenderers, it's got general conditions of contract arrangements, special conditions of contract arrangements, it's got tender data sheets, it's got schedule of requirements, and a whole lot. Now these are all different sections, all made up in the tender document. unfortunately, in our circumstances, most tenderers are only interested when they pick the tender document to go and look at the schedule of requirements.
I see.
You understand? So they just want to look at what the company is looking for. So they go and look at the schedule of requirements and they look at the items. Oh, they need vehicles, they need 4x4, they need saloon cars, they need, all manner of these goods, if you like. And so their concentration is on how do I get these items supplied to this company. And they lose out on the most essential part of this tender document, which has to do with ITT clauses. ITT stands for Instructions to Tenderers. There are several clauses giving you instructions how the tender is going to be engaged.
Interesting.
Yes.
It might be the reason why a lot of people lose out.
A lot of people lose out. In fact, I've always, in my lectures, during my delivery, I've been placing emphasis on this particular portion. Now, not only are you to just avail yourself with knowledge and understanding of the ITT, but there is another killer area called the TDS.
Full meaning?
Tender data sheet.
I see.
Now, what happens with the TDS is that the ITT, which is the Instruction to Tenderers, gives more or less general clauses. And then the TDS, you are allowed as an entity to vary some of the ITTs to make them specific. Now, let me give an example of a typical case where an ITT will be varied, and if you don't go to the TDS to see that variation that has been made on the ITT and you stand by the ITT, you lose out. For instance, the ITT talks about bid security, and that it is a requirement that everybody should provide a bid security in a bank guarantee by way of a bank, what do you call it? A bid security from a nominated or an accredited bank.
Okay.
That is what the ITT has said. So that is the clause. But then the TDS can vary it and said any bid security from an insurance company of repute will be acceptable.
Okay.
So he has gone to vary that requirement, which has given in the ITT it talks about the two, either bank bid security by a bank or an insurance company.
Okay.
So it's giving you that option. So you may decide and say, let me go for the insurance cover, because that is provided for in the ITT. But in the TDS, he goes to make it specific and said the bid security must be bank by a bank, an accredited bank or a bank of repute. So he has taken away that option of insurance.
Okay.
And now zero in on a bid security from a bank. In which case, if you had not gone to see the TDS, which has varied that clause, and you tender in an insurance bid security, you are disqualified on arrival.
Wow.
But of course, we don't disqualify bids at bid opening. I'm going to come to that as well. Now, let's look at another condition. Maybe there is a general clause that talks about alternative bids can be accepted, and that is in the ITT. He comes to the TDS, he says alternative bids are not allowed. So the TDS takes precedence over the ITT. And so when you pick a tender document, ladies and gentlemen and businessmen of Ghana, my advice is that if you do not have the expertise to read and understand the true terminologies that this document comes up with, find a consultant, find a procurement specialist, find somebody that you can fall on to give you more detailed meaning and explanation so you can understand and put up a winning tender. Having said that, you look at your the essential parts which I have mentioned, and then you look at the TDS, which varies any portion of the ITT, and then at least you are good to go by now looking at the schedule of requirements, which is actually the need of the entity. Then you can begin to put your tender together. So don't rush to pick a tender document and just go straight and look at your schedule of requirements and begin to put a tender together.
I say, if you are listening to us, is some 41 minutes after 1. You're listening to the Master Class. Master Class is powered by Joy Business and is brought to you by Goel. They say good energy, and Goel, we say Yenara Yedi Ni. And today we have Mr. ABAJ, who is the CEO for the Public Procurement Authority, and we are looking at getting set for the competition. There's a text message that has come from I think Vodi Logistics in Niboy Town. We'll look at it, but let me also remind you that Goel's new super synthetic 5W20 and the 5W30 loops is the best engine oil for your vehicle. They are specifically engineered for you, and they help you to make sure that your car works efficiently on all model petrol and diesel engines that you have. They clean, protect, reduce fuel consumption, and prolong oil change intervals, and enhance your engine performance from start till you switch off that engine of yours. Go to any Goel filling station and grab the new Goel Super Synthetic 5W20 and 5W30 engine oil for super vehicle performance. Goel, good energy. Goel, Yenara, Yedine. We will be opening the phone lines. The number is 0302 216 541. You can call us and be part of the conversation. But I'm going to allow Mr. J to continue with the lecture whilst we welcome your comments through the WhatsApp platform, which is 0244 340 437, or you call us on 0302 216 541. Yeah, Mr. J, you were making a point.
Yeah, sure. So let me use this opportunity to give a checklist for tenderers to consider each time they are putting their tender together. So having looked at the essential portions, as I said, we're saying that try and package your tender neatly. It gives a reflection of your company. Some tenders are very well packaged, and of course it's not because of the package that is going to show the contents are, but that gives an initial impression of how serious your company is. Number one. Now submit the required copies of tenders. The tender, the ITT might have requested you specifically to produce or to submit one original and 3 copies. Make sure you do so. 3. Ensure that all corrected mistakes are initialed and signed against by the authorized officer. Don't leave mistakes that have been corrected unsigned, because it could be taken as somebody having authored with your tender. Write dates in full. Sometimes people will write 5/4/2017 when indeed what they mean is 4/5/2017. You understand? 5/4/2017 is supposed to be 5th of April 2017. It can also mean that it is actually 4th of May 2017. You know, so what you have to do is just put your 5th April, write 5th as it is, write April in full, and write 2017 in full.
Okay.
To take away any form of confusion and ambiguity. Again, follow instructions on how to address your envelope. The bid is telling you specifically how to address your envelope. Maybe you might have picked your bid from the procurement officer's office. That is where you pick your bid document. So you may be tempted to address the bid to the procurement officer. Meanwhile, in the instructions, you have been specifically directed that address your bid to the chief executive or to the minister of that entity, and not the procurement officer. That is also part of the instructions, and you got to take note of it. Ensure that copies of your statutory documents are valid, because they are also requirements and they're going along with your bid. So make sure that you submitting your bid with all those copies that have been required, the statutory documents I mentioned earlier, and that they are all valid, so that you don't have a problem where you submit
company registration, your
tax certificate, your VAT, everything that has been requested that are statutory documents.
Yeah.
Make sure they are valid. All right. Then you also want to make sure that the bid security must be in the format that has been prescribed. You know, the format that has been prescribed and the percentage.
Okay, so what are the likely formats that sometimes, these agencies will require? A banker's draft or what?
You see, the banker's draft or what the format is normally, a format will be part of the bid document. They will show you how it should be worded.
Okay.
So if it is taking it from the bank will be given specific language. So you carry that format to the bank.
Okay.
And then it is given in that order.
Okay.
Because if you give any other interpretation, it will mean something else, and they may not accept it as it is.
Okay.
And the most other important one too has to do with the percentage of the bid security that has been requested. When the organization is looking for a 2% of your bid price, if you bring a bid security of 5% of your bid price, they can disqualify you because you did not, as it were, you did not respond to the instructions. In procurement, in procurement is about instructions.
Okay.
This is how we want your bid to come. If you do otherwise, it's a different matter altogether. Now we are dealing with a very important issue at the moment at PP, and I've put a team together to bring these issues out so that it will have a general acceptance. It's got to do with what we call material and immaterial deviation.
It's like writing an exams. You go to the exams on a specific question, so you keep writing more than is needed.
That is it. So we talk about what is material deviation and what is immaterial deviation, because the material deviation will automatically render your bid to be non-responsive.
Wow.
Whereas the immaterial ones, which unfortunately a lot of people are using pretty immaterial deviations to disqualify.
Mr. J, let me just announce the phone lines because we don't have much time.
Sure.
You can be part of this conversation right now. It's 0302 216 541. The phone lines are activated. If you have questions for Mr. J on today's lecture, which is getting set for the competition, he's taught us a lot. You can ask those questions. I would also go to the text console and pick some questions that have come in. The first question, Mr. J, before we go on, is coming from George AC in Accra. And he says, interesting conversation and many thanks to Mr. J for the education. Please, can you share one more time website for the registration of the entities? I think that he's talking about last week what we spoke about here with regards to, it is the PPA website, and I'm sure Mr. J will give you the full name with regards to that. And this one says, please, can you ask Mr. J to briefly walk me through the procurement process? This is coming from Emmanuel of Akosombo. Emmanuel of Akosombo have that question. But you can be part of the conversation by calling us on the phone number that we have announced, 0302 216 541. Mr. J,
question?
Yes. I want you to answer the question for that was that of George, and then that for Emmanuel as well.
The first question, I think he was talking about the website.
He wants to know the website. I think
I'll just call the website.
Yes.
The PPA website is www.ppaghana.org.
Okay, so
you go there and then you can search through our various titles and look for tender opportunities or tender notices, and then you'll be able to get which tenders are available on the website.
Okay, I think that we have somebody on the line, Mr. J. Okay, Eric from Accra is on the line. Hello, good afternoon to you, Eric.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, Eric, you can go ahead, please.
Yes, I would like to ask Mr. J. I think something is bothering me concerning some of the things that he's saying. With regards to the bid security, assuming I'm submitting a tender, and then at the time of submission, my bid security was in part. Can I submit it later? I just want to know.
All right.
Something that I can submit.
Okay, Eric, I'll have Mr. J answer the question for you. Mr. J, I mean, that's Eric is talking about submitting in part or submitting it in later.
Yeah, it's part of the instruction to tenderers. And like I said, if anybody who is taking part in a tender takes note of the instructions given in the tender document, one of which is that the tender submission deadline is a time and a date. So when the tender submission deadline talks about 10 a.m., your tender submission must be submitted in full with every requirement, including your statutory requirements, the documents that are required, statutory documents that are required, and bid security.
So you cannot come back later.
So once your bid is submitted, you cannot add or subtract anything from it.
Okay, let's take this call from Alewa in Accra. Alewa, good afternoon to you.
Alawi Dauda, please.
Alawi Dauda. Okay, thank you very much, Alawi. I'm so sorry for having butchered your name.
For the wonderful job, and I must say that your resource person exudes, authority in that area. But I want to find out what remedy is available for somebody whose disqualification or tender was just that. That's the first time he was applying. All other things being equal.
Okay, Alawi, thank you very much. If you can repeat your question, you want to look at what remedies are available?
Remedies available to a person, maybe from the point of the perspective of the PPA. If a person's disqualification of a tender was just the fact that it was the first time he was applying for that consultancy work. But
okay.
All others, he met all other requirements, please.
Okay, all right, we'll have Mr. J answer that question. So he wants to know what remedies are available to, maybe it's your first time, and so for that matter, you were disqualified.
Yeah, you cannot use that as a means of disqualification. You see, once you meet all the technical requirements as prescribed in the tender document, and mind you, let's put this across to tenderers to take note. No entity is allowed to introduce any evaluation criteria that has not been pre-disclosed in the tender document. Okay. So you do not have the luxury of introducing any factor or any criteria that you did not envisage and captured in your tender document at the evaluation stage. You are bound by law, all right, to use only the predetermined evaluation criteria that you introduced at the tender document stage to be able to do evaluation. And therefore, if any evaluation committee, for whatever reason, introduces any other criteria which was not pre-disclosed, it will be seen to be unjustified.
And what does the person do? Come to
yes,
PPA?
And then when you are a tenderer and you feel that you have not been properly, or there is no justification to your qualification, to your disqualification, you have a remedy under our law in section 78 and 79. And that remedy says immediately you become aware of that anomaly or that injustice, you must apply for a redress by first writing to the entity within 21 days when you became aware. Now, the entity is also under obligation after your complaint to give you a response within 21 days of receipt of your letter. Now, there are two options. Either they respond within the 21 days and you are not satisfied, or they do not respond after 21 days. You can come to PPA, and then PPA will take the matter off from the entity and deal with it.
Okay, Mr. J, I have a question before we take this question from the council.
Yeah.
I mean, should the entity in writing or in any form inform you the reason for disqualifying you or not, allowing you to be part of the bid?
When the evaluation process is complete, they do not communicate the outcome of the evaluation to anybody.
Okay.
Because that evaluation report is still subject to approval. There are 3 levels of approval.
Okay.
Depending on the threshold, if the threshold is within the threshold of the head of entity, the evaluation report will be sent to the head of entity by the procurement officer or procurement head for the head of entity to make the final determination of the successful bidder. If it is within the threshold of an entity tender committee, that evaluation report must be placed before the entity tender committee for the committee to go through the evaluation and satisfy itself that the criteria that was used to arrive at the successful bidder is that which was captured in the tender document.
So me as the supplier, I'm not entitled to...
I'm coming there. And then if it is a threshold that has to go to the Central Tender Review Committee, they will also have to determine it along the same lines and satisfy themselves that they have gone through the whole process. Having gotten to that stage and then they're getting a concurrent approval, the entity is obliged under the law to inform all bidders, both successful and unsuccessful, of either you not being successful or you being successful.
Let's take this very last comment and then we'll wrap up, because
Yeah.
it's almost time for the news
yeah.
hour too. Now, good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity. I will please like your host to help by throwing some light on the difference between sole tendering, restrictive and selective tendering. That is also coming from, I think, Vodi Logistics, that is Niboy Town.
Yeah, selective tendering and restrictive tendering are the same. The words are used interchangeably. So restrictive tendering is the same as selective tendering. What it means is that instead of an open competitive bid where a newspaper advert is made, this time a short list is made for a few suppliers depending on some conditions that the law has set in section 38 and 39. All right, so that is the same. Now with single source or sole source, the actual word is single source. It is mostly and loosely used as sole source, but in actual fact, the word is single source. Single source is where there are circumstances which may not make a competitive bidding feasible, and those circumstances has to do with exclusivity, agency, catastrophe, additional supplies, experiment, or national security considerations. Those are the circumstances under which you can apply for a single source, and you must get approval from the PPA proud to embarking on anything single source. Thank you.
Right, let me say thank you very much, Mr. ABJ. He is the CEO for the Public Procurement Authority, and he's been our teacher for today. This is the Masterclass Poet by Joy Business and brought to you by Goel. Goel, good energy. Goel, Yenara, Yedieni. My name is Northern Aqua Hayford, and next week we will be looking at what to do when something goes wrong or if you feel unfairly treated as far as, the tendering process is concerned. We touched on a few of it today, but next week we'll go into details, and I'm sure that you will have learned a lot from today's Masterclass. News at 2 is up next.